Hello. How are you,
Hey,
Brian?
Andy. Doing well. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. All right, everyone. Wishing everyone a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Today is over here it's Thursday, the 10th of August. It's probably still the Wednesday, the 9th of August, over where you're at, Brian.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's the evening of the 9th and the 10th where you are, and markets have been up and down. At least Bitcoin is back over 30K, so
Yeah,
that's a
that's
good sign.
that's interesting. Yeah, and a good time to talk about it as well. So, all right, I can hear you well. I assume you can hear me well. I'm
Yeah,
hoping the audience can hear as well. Okay, well, welcome everyone. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Right? Okay, so if you have any friends or family who may be interested to diversify your portfolio, to look into crypto, or they're interested in this topic of on-chain analytics, this is the channel to come to. Future proof. And today, as usual, we have Brian on once a month from Santiment. And Santiment is a platform that specializes in on-chain analytics. In fact, it's one of the I use it every single day. It's a fantastic platform. And so today we're gonna discuss quite a few things. And I think now that Bitcoin's over 30K, that's probably one of the main focus today. So, Brian, what are we talking about today?
yeah. I mean, we'll do a general overview of what the markets look like. Let me know if you can see my screen. Okay.
Yep, it's up.
Perfect. Yeah. So we can definitely see that it's been kind of a Bitcoin heavy dominant month or so, depending on which assets you're looking at. So if you're looking at, some of the top caps, they've kind of been struggling. You can see XRP still up 35% over the past 30 days, Dogecoin 16, Shiba 28. And then you have a few randoms like Flex that went up 167% and just jumped into the top 100 recently. Um, but overall, it still appears as though the social volume is going heavily toward Bitcoin. You can see overall, people are starting to talk about crypto more in general. These green squares are all uh, indicating that there is significantly more social volume toward that asset than in the month prior. So when you see Bitcoin here at 40% higher than the previous 30 days, that means there's quite a bit more chatter now and potentially optimism toward the asset right now. Ethereum right next to it, obviously XRP up 365%, one of the highest because of its SEC victory about a month ago. Um, but one thing I wanted to get in with you today is talking about how Bitcoin versus altcoins are looking right now, as a lot of questions have risen regarding that subject in our community. So, um,
Yeah,
before I jump into it, I'm very curious what you've seen on your side. Obviously, the Litecoin halving was kind of a disappointment as far as price went. But any other topics that or assets, I should say, that kind of
yeah.
crossed your
So,
community?
so yeah. So I think that there's probably quite a few questions. I guess the audience, those especially those who are new to crypto may want to know. For example, they may want to know, hey, what do you mean by Bitcoin dominance? So that's probably something especially to we're always welcoming of people new to this space. So I'll just explain very quickly what Bitcoin dominance means. When you look at the total market cap of all the coins that are out there, it when we say Bitcoin dominance, we look at the market cap of Bitcoin in relation to the total market cap. So if Bitcoin dominance, say, is 40%, for example, or 50%, then the entire market cap is made up. Well, half of it is made up from Bitcoin. So that's what we mean by Bitcoin dominance. And in the past, and as now, we've always looked at Bitcoin dominance based, because sometimes Bitcoin dominance goes up and then some and other things happen, and then when Bitcoin's dominance goes down, then other things happen. So I guess uh, as analysts, we're always trying to find correlations as to, well, what happens when Bitcoin's dominance goes up or when it comes down. Anything else to add on that subject, Brian?
No, you nailed it well. I think people are always trying to find what's the optimal portfolio allocations for themselves, and usually in bear markets the answer is Bitcoin. In bull markets, you can actually start to spread things around and put in some more hopeful altcoins that are a little on the speculative end that you wouldn't normally invest in because everything is going up together.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those who are new, if you're wondering what altcoins are, altcoins is just a term that we use for any other coin that is not Bitcoin, including its very close cousin Litecoin, that's predominantly based on Bitcoin's code. That's still an altcoin. As long as it's not Bitcoin, that's an altcoin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So, we have sporadic altcoins that have been on good runs, but a lot of others have been struggling. It's a very mixed bag right now. And during these kinds of situations and market types of scenarios, it's very important to look at the data and see which ones are looking healthy and which ones are falling behind. Uh, so, why don't we look at, some of the metrics that I think are important to take into account as we figure out whether this could be an altcoin breakout time or not. And it begins by just looking at whether Bitcoin is in a healthy place. Uh, Based on, I got to update this to the last 3 months. There we go. Based on what we've seen with the S&P versus Bitcoin, we're actually seeing Bitcoin kind of gaining on it right now. S&P at the end of July was looking really good, right around a 15, 16-month high. And then it started to tail off. But Bitcoin actually made a higher high just in the past couple of days, returning to a 2-week high and getting back over 30K again. So the correlation, at least for the short term, is starting to lessen. And oftentimes when we see that's the case, altcoins are the ones that can really benefit and play catch up because the crypto sector is looking healthier than the equity sector. And for good measure, we can also see that gold is pretty unappealing right now. So that's further going to bring some extra market cap and eyeballs into crypto, at least for the next 1 to 3 weeks or so, as people look for speculative assets to invest in. So I find this interesting, Andy. I'm curious on your take with, the CPI and, the choice to raise the interest rates by 25 BPS last month. Any thoughts on equities right now?
Yeah, I think from an equities perspective, one of the things that we are constantly on the lookout for is always value stocks, and I guess it's an interesting topic because if you think about it, when one looks at their investment portfolio, you're looking at one, you ask yourself, well, what's my risk appetite? Like, how much risk can I take? And if they ask me that, the answer I usually give them is, well, can you sleep at night? If you can sleep at night, then you've taken enough risks where you're still comfortable. If you get to a point where you cannot sleep at night, then you've taken on too much risk. That's my metric for measuring
Yeah.
how much risk. And so when you so again, every individual is different. Every individual's you know I guess situations different, and they've got different financial goals. So it really depends on where they're at the time that they're investing. And so some may prefer to take on more risk. Then they may want to allocate a larger percentage of their portfolio into higher risk based assets. Those who are how do say close to retirement, and they've got a nice sum of money and they don't want to take too much risk. Then something like money markets, or looking into perhaps value-based stocks that pays dividends on a regular basis, that's something that they would then look at and weight more heavily on their portfolio. So I think in the short term, with inflation, it I mean, inflation is definitely rampant. It's definitely here. I think in the short term, um, in the short term, obviously it's uncertain, but I think in the long term, or in the meantime, what we have been looking at are value-based stocks, especially those that are. So we look at individual companies that are actually uh, doing really well. They're making profits, and they've consistently made profits. Say in the last 10 years, they've consistently paid out dividends in the last 10 years, and they've consistently had positive cash flow in the last 10 years. So these are some of the criteria that we look at, and so then it doesn't really matter what the current market conditions are. We would then, as long as you're paying 50 cents on the dollar for that stock, it's always a good buy for us. And then we weight it accordingly to our individual risk our risk appetite. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good synopsis, Andy. And I guess the main difference between investing in crypto assets versus equities is you don't have any of those statistics or, P&E ratios, debt to equity, any of that stuff to rely on. You're really looking at, what are the whales doing? How is the on-chain health? And how's the sentiment? And that's what sentiment really does well. And we'll continue to kind of jump into a few other things to help us navigate what that looks like right now. Another chart that I preloaded is the correlation, or I should say the difference between Bitcoin and altcoin mentions. This is what it looks like with the shared axis off. There's always going to be a lot more mentions of the ticker BTC and the word Bitcoin compared to actual references of altcoins, because usually if someone's talking altcoins, you're talking about a specific one like XRP or Cardano or whatever. So we'd like to keep this off to give us a better gauge of when it might be Bitcoin versus altcoin time. You can see I don't have the price layered on it right now. Let me try a quick refresh just to see if it can jump on. It's okay if it doesn't show, but generally speaking, when you see a lot of discussion of altcoins like we did back here in mid-June, or I should say mid-July, this actually is a bearish sign, because lots of altcoin talk is usually a sign of greed. It's a sign where people are tired of getting, a 5% gain in a month, and they say, hey, if I get into Pepe, maybe I can get a 40% gain. And that's when euphoria and greed starts to kick in. So we actually don't want to see these red lines that form and go ahead of the blue. We'd like to see it stay very low, like it was toward the beginning of August. And look, we actually saw a pretty big spike here just a few hours ago today. And we want to generally avoid market conditions when there's greed, and we want to jump in when there's fear. So based on this alone, it does look like there's a little bit of mild greed that just started to pop up, maybe due to the fact that Bitcoin recently jumped back above Bitcoin. But I like, these moments back on August 5th when everything is very low. There's little discussion of altcoins and even little discussion of Bitcoin. So right now it's kind of mediocre, I would say.
That is interesting.
Yeah. And then, before I go into a few on-chain things, we can also, of course, look at Bitcoin's whales, which are declining still, just slightly. They were on an uptick, you can see, between early April all the way until late May or so. And they've kind of declined a little bit over the past month and a half, or I should say 2.5 months. So that's something to look out for. And then the other question is, what about stable coins? And those are looking better. We can see the charts and whales are accumulating more and more tether. The $100K to $10 million holders are back above 40%. USDC also very high right now, sitting at about 37.1%. So the top two stablecoins are showing that there's an increase in buying power, which is encouraging. And then the other thing related to both Bitcoin versus altcoins is how much is the dominance related to BTC in terms of discussion as opposed to price dominance, like we talked about earlier. We're looking at social dominance, the percentage of discussion related to Bitcoin, kind of like what we were looking at on this chart, except this is just showing the direct percentages of Bitcoin talk versus other top 100 assets. And you can see I've got to up the time frame. There we go. So it did dip yesterday. This was the lowest Bitcoin social dominance had been in almost 2 months. So that's a bit of a concern. It did jump back up, but if I just smooth things out, we'll look at like a week at a time. You can see it's starting to get a little low again. We actually like seeing that Bitcoin dominance is starting to taper off. It can kind of add some variance, and oftentimes it's because altcoins are going on runs, or they're, back in June here, it's when altcoins were really, really falling off and there was a lot of panic. So people were talking about altcoins in a negative fashion, and that actually propelled Bitcoin to go on an absolutely huge run, with the announcements of ETFs aiding that, of course. So Bitcoin social dominance is kind of coming back down to the neutral expectation as opposed to the really high range like it was a month ago.
So
And then,
Brian, just just a quick question on the previous chart where we're looking at the social dominance of Bitcoin. So when the social dominance of Bitcoin tapers off, uh, it and we try to correlate that to say the price of Bitcoin. Do we are we seeing that when the social dominance of Bitcoin tapers off, that's when people aren't paying attention to Bitcoin,
correct.
and that's when it's easier. Well, it's I wouldn't say obviously this is not financial advice, but it would then be a time to then look at perhaps maybe layering into Bitcoin at when no one's looking at it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So generally, high social dominance of Bitcoin is a sign of fear, which can actually be a decent sign for the future of markets. But when it's low and going in the opposite direction, and everyone's looking at Pepe and Dogecoin, Shiba, and a lot of meme coins, that could be a sneaky good time to actually get out of altcoins and put your money into Bitcoin specifically, even if it isn't, this is a better overall market condition for everything. This is a better condition for specifically getting out of altcoins and into Bitcoin, if
Yep.
that makes
Okay.
sense. So
Yeah.
that's the best way we try to interpret those things.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. And then another good one to look at several altcoins at the same time. We like to look at the ratio of on-chain transaction volume and profit to loss. And I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but what it means is when you see high profits being taken for an asset, perhaps 2-to-1 or even a 3-to-1 ratio, that's a sign that there's likely going to be some drop off. Like we saw two really big profit takes back here at the beginning of June, and then the week following we saw a big drop off. And then notice how here they were mostly in negative territory, indicating there were more lost transactions than profit transactions. And what do you know? We suddenly get this big bounce, which is of course aided by the ETF announcements. But the point still stands. You want to look for times, actually like right now, where you're seeing a lot of lost transactions compared to profit. It's very early, and this is a small sample size because our weeks generally start on Thursday for the purpose of our data. So right now, we may want to give it a bit more time, but at least right now we're seeing some lost transactions really piling up. So that could be a good short-term signal for altcoins because people are capitulating, and when people capitulate, that's usually a good sign for whales to start jumping in, pushing up the price of those altcoins, and you can hop on the ride that they start when they do that.
Yeah, interesting. Hey, Right, and if we could save a bit of time later to maybe do a bit of recap on LTC's halving, which happened
Sure.
very recently, to see what happened, and then maybe possibly even like we'll talk about the halving, and just maybe look at some on-chain analytics to do a post-mortem to see what happened
Yeah.
in before and after.
Yeah. Let's just look at funding rates here really quick, like I was
Sure.
planning, and then we'll just jump into it. We're seeing that it's mostly a lot of longs going on with a lot of red. These red bars indicate there's a slight positive bias and a little more longing toward crypto as opposed to shorting. Shorting is actually the time when you start to see those big rises in price as shorts get liquidated, and those shorts that get liquidated end up providing, essentially metaphoric rocket fuel for prices to move up. Right now, that's not really what's happening. It's mostly pretty neutral with a few longs thrown in there, like XRP. A lot of people are still very hyped about it, um, and not really too much else. So, it's kind of a quiet time for altcoins right now, and people are, uh, in my opinion, kind of napping a little bit. They're kind of just waiting for something exciting to happen because markets have been mostly flat over the past month, as we've seen.
They have.
All right, so let's look at Litecoin for the last few minutes here and see what's been happening before, during, and after the halving happened. We'll look at just the past 3 months. Actually, we'll zoom into just the last month. So the halving happened about 1 week ago today on the 2nd, um, right about here. And you can see pretty much right as the halving was kicking off, I think it was probably right about here, prices really just started to drop off. And it wasn't just, all markets. Litecoin specifically had a big drop off here. If I put on the price versus Bitcoin, we might get a better look. So in yellow, yeah, you can see, it was actually looking pretty good, sitting at about a 2 week high or so. And all of a sudden, prices really drop off fast as the halving commences. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, the halving is done now. So whatever the price was planning to do, it's already done. Well, not exactly, right? If you go back to September of last year, 11 months ago, when the Ethereum uh, halving was happening, it was I should say the merge, not the halving. It was a similar time where we saw a little bit of optimism going into it, and then all of a sudden a big drop off. And eventually Ethereum had a big recovery and it went above 2100 back in April. So that could very well be the case. We might just be shaking out some of the doubters right now in Litecoin, and then it might actually see a little bit of an uptick from the fact that all of its coins have more theoretical value due to there being less supply and the mining being twice as difficult as it was before August 2nd.
Yeah.
We see active addresses fairly flat. Circulation is flat. MVRV is a good one to take a look at because that's actually showing what the average traders are looking like right now. And it's interesting, despite the decline, 30-day traders are still up about 11% or so, while 365-day traders are up 0.6%, which is essentially even. So we would ideally like to see, if I zoom out 6 months or so, we want to see something more like this, right? With both the long term and the short term under this zero axis, indicating they are underwater, or something like this, right? You can see what happens when they're both underwater at the same time. This is where bottoms form, and it's a good signal to jump in to the asset. So I think that right now there still needs to be a little more cooling off, despite the fact that since this top, what it looks like since July 2nd, prices dropped 26%, but it may have a little more dropping to do just to get the 30-day average trading returns down into the negatives. And then you've got a really good setup to buy at a premium or a very low risky time frame compared to normal.
Yeah. It's interesting in terms of the price action that's happened to Litecoin. since the halving, because I think in the last few halvings, that absolutely the same things happen. The halving happens, and then the price kind of just tapers off after that.
Yeah, totally. I think that the more people that kind of bake in the price and highly anticipate the event, the more it becomes kind of a buy the rumors, sell the news situation. And I think that happened with Ethereum last year, and it happened with Litecoin last week.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, are there any metrics we should look at on Litecoin?
Yeah, I mean, I think whales are a good indicator right now. So it's back down at $84. I like looking at um, holders that have anywhere between, let's say, 100 all the way to 100,000 Litecoin. And it actually
Mhm.
looks like they're still accumulating a bit. So this is decent to see. Um, so this was about 10 days before the halving. They were holding about
Mhm.
42.4%. They've added about a half percentage of the entire supply to their collective wallets. And we could also look at it in terms of absolute coins. So yeah, in terms of the absolute amount of coins that they hold, these key sharks and whales, they're back up to holding 31.5 million, which looks like this is the highest amount that they've held all year long. We've got to go back to 2022 here, and they're still above the line. So the last
Wow.
time, oh yeah, they're continuing to go up. So I mean, this is a good sign for Litecoin. You've got the price kind of moving down like this, while shark and whale holdings are doing something more like that, right? That's a bullish divergence, in my opinion. Um, and it does show that on the very long-term scale, Litecoin does still have some viability to go on a bit of a run. Maybe by the end of the year, maybe sometime in 2024. It often foreshadows a Bitcoin rise, so that's something to keep in mind for Litecoin. And Bitcoin has its own halving coming up in about 9 months or so from now. So yeah, there are some positive signs, and I think this is probably the main indicator that I would look at for Litecoin right now.
Yeah, that's interesting to see. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the sharks and whales have just been accumulating.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So I like the
interesting.
look of this for sure. Whale transactions, they're kind of all over the place. We've seen, it's very unexplainable what goes on with Litecoin's whale transactions, but you can see they have like a huge surge in $1 million plus transactions that have been going on pretty much since late April. Um, so it's hard to make much of that, but you know, especially during rises, you might see like a gradual, rise until eventually there's this huge. If you see that one singular yellow line right
Yeah,
there, that
yeah.
pretty much precisely called the top. If you see Litecoin suddenly go on a big, plummet, that same kind of signal can be true the other way, and that would indicate that there's accumulation going on all of a sudden. So when Litecoin is starting to diverge from Bitcoin and going up rapidly or down rapidly, and then you see a whale transaction spike, that's what you want to look out for, to go along with the fact that right now it appears that those sharks and whales are
Interesting. Oh, thanks for that.
You bet, my friend.
Wow, that is quite an insight. That's very insightful, by the way. I mean, for those who, I don't know, if you were new to Litecoin and you had first thought about Litecoin, or you saw it on social media and you thought, hey, having and you bought into it, and then now the price has tanked 26% from the high, from when you bought it, you'd be thinking, what the heck. But then, with what Brian just shared with us, that's interesting. I mean, the whales aren't, they're continue to accumulate. Wow.
Yeah, I think that's a very positive sign.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyways, I think we're about at that time.
We
I
are,
would
we
say,
are.
in synopsis, it looks like there could be a short time frame argument for altcoins to go on a bit of a run. Um, I think that overall there still needs to be a little bit more pain for traders to feel. And once you
Mhm.
see average traders really saying like um, this, and this are scam coins, I should have only stayed in Bitcoin. Altcoins are all flawed and will never be as good as Bitcoin. Like that's the time where you actually want to jump into altcoin when everyone else is writing it off.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll just close it with Warren Buffett's quote, right? Be afraid when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are afraid.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's fantastic. And thank you again, Brian, for jumping on today.
No, my pleasure as always, Andy. It's great to catch up with you and talk markets.
Yeah, it's always great to have you on. I mean, you're an absolute expert at on-chain analytics, using the sentiment platform. It is for those of you who are interested in getting access to this platform. Obviously, go to sentiment.net.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And use code EquitiesTracker when you sign up. You get a free week of Sandbase Pro to look through all these metrics, and then you can use that code to get 25% off your first month. It's a great deal.
and then tune in every second Thursday of the month, and listen to Brian and I talk about on-chain analytics.
Absolutely. We'll upload it to our YouTube channel as well as you do with yours. So catch it on either channel and make sure you follow us both.
Yeah, definitely. Well, once again, thank you, Brian. Have a great evening. Appreciate you coming on. Always great to have you on.
You as well. I hope you have a great morning over there, and we'll talk to you next month or so.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you, Brian, and thank you guys for tuning in.
Thanks, guys. Bye bye.
Bye bye.